Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Ben the Boat Painter, a relaxing look at life and nature on the canals as we paint two 48-foot narrowboats. Just left the boat, it's around the corner this morning. We're out on an early morning row. What a way to start the day. And the good thing about being on a rowing boat is you see things that you would probably miss when you're on the land. You remember last week we had a little, was it last week? No, a few weeks ago actually, we had a little kayak mission. And we saw some reed beetles and a water ladybird, which are very unusual to see from the land. So hopefully we'll see something similar as we're out here. I've just passed some blackberries. We're going to do a little spin around. This is why we're out here actually. What is that? Oh look, I've got a moth. There's a moth in the blackberries. Let's have a look at this. Hang on. Oh, this is great. What a great start to the day. This is amazing. Okay, that was a successful morning mission, was it not? Look at this. A full pot of blackberries for our efforts. And the current is now carrying us slowly back to the boats where we're going to have to start work. So what's the order of business this week? Well, we are going to continue adding the layers of undercoat to the roof and the deck because of the amount of protection that those particular areas need. We may also get our first layer of gloss top coat onto the back hatch because that is coming on very nicely. We started the back doors last time, didn't we? So we can perhaps get our first layer of undercoat onto that section. There's also some niggly little areas around the edges of the back deck underneath and also underneath the edges of the hatch that we need to start. It's a bit of a bad habit out of mine, leaving those little tasks to the end. I also regret it when I do that, so I'm going to try and break that habit. Yeah, we need to get started. Oh, hello. Yes, look, a few demoiselles over there. It's very hard to get work done on the canal because of all this cool stuff. We need to get back to the boat because, yeah, you can't get complacent. We need to keep working. It's August now, and if you think by the end of October, we're not going to be able to work because it's going to be too dark, damp, the days are too short to really do anything significant. So, as much as I'd love to just let the current slowly take us down, I need to get back on the oars and get cracking. So let's go back down to the boat and we can start some work. Okay, so it's time to turn our attention to those niggly little jobs that we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. And there's two areas in particular around the back deck that we need to address. The first is the underside of the back deck itself. You can see here, the back deck's on hinges and we've just propped it up against the tiller arm here. And we need to look at the underside because it's very rusty. In particular, this section here. The rust is flaking off very badly. We also have these drainage channels down here. If any water runs off the sides of the back deck, it drops down into these channels, round the edge, and there's a little hole here, which theoretically the water is supposed to drain out of and then end up in the canal, although that isn't always the case because they get blocked up very easily. So we need to go around. We've scraped it. We did actually scrape it a little bit earlier. I didn't have that on camera actually, but I have had a little go at them. So maybe just a quick sand with very rough sandpaper, a bit of rust converter, and then we can start painting them as we would everything else. So it's not a hugely pleasant job. It's going to create a lot of dust, particularly when we go under the deck here with all this rust. So we need to put some kind of sheet down to stop it getting into our bilge. Okay, off we go with our scraper. Scraping, brushing, scraping, over and over again. It feels like we're doing the same thing over and over again. Don't really like this job, got to admit. Ah dear, it's not very relaxing. Noisy, dusty. Makes my wrist ache a little bit, to be honest. So I like to kind of have a little daydream while we're doing it. And this is more of the kind of thing I'd like to be doing. Nice, isn't it? Oh yeah, much better. Oh, hang on a minute. This isn't actually a daydream. This is happening right now. We are on our way to the River Stort, travelling northward up the River Lea, and we're just about to turn right in an easterly direction. River Lea continues north, sort of to our left there. We're going to turn the corner onto the River Stort, which we've been looking forward to for a little while now. As you can see, it's considerably narrower than the River Lea, considerably windier as well, so hopefully we can find somewhere nice to moor up and get on with our work. So here we are in our new mooring, which is absolutely beautiful, I must say. We'll have a look around later. It's a bit of a traumatic journey actually. Water levels are quite low, so there's a couple of unsuccessful attempts to moor up before we found somewhere suitable. So we'll have a look around later, but first of all, let's have a look at this area that we were working on before we moved. We've sanded down the back doors, we've treated the exposed areas of rust, and the next stage, of course, would be to prime these rust-treated areas. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's open the doors and have a look. And we can see we have these borders around here. And I think it would be sensible to sort of sand back and rust treat these first, because then when we get our primer out, we can also work on these at the same time, so it's a bit more efficient. We also have these areas on the inside surfaces of the back doors. Got these nice nature murals, which are looking a little bit bedraggled, I would say. Problem is they've been painted on MDF, which is very, well, it reacts very badly to damp, and in the wintertime, although it's inside, we're going to get condensation on the inside of these doors. So it'd be nice to do something with these, also the paint on the inside surface of the doors as well. But I think that's probably a job for wintertime, because it'd be nice to have some painting jobs for wintertime. We can't paint outside, so the warmth from the inside of the boat will allow us to work on these in the winter months. So we'll save that for later and get on with these borders. And away we go. And if you're a regular viewer, you'll know that I never use power tools. But even if I did, I'd have to put the power tools down for this job, because I'd never fit them in the small area that constitutes these door borders. So by hand it is. And after we've sanded it, just time to give it a quick brush off, tap cloth, and a little bit of rust treatment over any bare metal that we've exposed. And once the rust treatment's had its 4 hours of drying time, it's time to get the primer out. And once we've done the primer, we might actually leave this job until the end, despite me saying that it's a bad habit to leave it to the end, because this job is a lot less weather sensitive than the others. And we can see it's a very nice finish there. And this is where we are. Take a look at this. You can just see the roof of Tranquil Waters there. I'll clean the roof up tomorrow. And we've still got our rust treatment out from touching up the borders there. And time to go under the deck. And we're going to apply the rust treatment all over the underside of the deck. Around the edges, we've got some quite serious rust. You can see the pitted metal along the sort of top edge and down the left-hand side there. And that's after we've removed as much of the rust as we can physically. I mean, this is not what this rust treatment's for. We do need to remove as much as we can before we apply this, because this rust treatment only really works on quite a thin layer of rust. So if we apply it to a thick layer, okay, it'll help us slow down the onset of rust on the top layer, but under any rust underneath that this rust treatment solution hasn't soaked into, it's going to continue to corrode. So it's very important to use this properly. Resisting the temptation to apply it too thickly, also applying it at the correct temperature, i.e. when it's quite nice and warm, and also remembering to remove as much rust as possible before applying it. Okay, here we are back on the roof. Where are we with the roof exactly? Well, we've just completed our 4th layer of undercoat. In addition to that, we also had 3 layers of primer on the back section of the roof, so that gives a grand total of 7 coats of paint, which is pretty good going. And what comes after undercoat? Well, if you were thinking top coat, in this instance you'd only be half right, because the next layer of paint we're going to do is half undercoat, half top coat. We are now ready to put on our top coat on top of our undercoat, and we want them to stick together as good as possible, which they will do fine. But if we were to put a layer of half undercoat, half top coat in between the top coat and the undercoat, they're going to stick even better. So there's no reason why we can't do that. So let's get on with that now. Here we have our top coat, and we've also got a little bit of undercoat left in this plastic pot. So we want to do about half and half. I think we've got about 500ml here. Okay, and off we go with our half undercoat, half top coat. Although to be fair, by the colour of the paint, it probably looks like it's more than half Undercoat, slightly less than half Topcoat. Although we don't have to get the proportion exactly right. Any mix of Undercoat and Topcoat is going to go a long way to helping the Topcoat adhere to the Undercoat. And what a lovely scene this is. I think this is why I love this job. I don't love every aspect of the job, I've got to say. I mean, scraping the underside of that deck wasn't very nice. But, yeah, a scene like this, I think that justifies our decision to come to the Stort. Might be a little more awkward to work on the boat because of the width of the waterway. We are, in fact, unable to turn the boat round in this spot, so we can really only work on the side we can see as the boat stands here. I mean, I could swap the boats round. I mean, we could work from the towpath, but I do like working from the rowing boat. It's a little bit more privacy, and I just like being in the rowing boat on the water. I mean, who wouldn't? Anyway, we're going to have a little look around the hillside later on. Lots of farmland around here. You can see there's a nice bit of woodland on the right hand side. And after another hard day's work, although to be fair it didn't look like I was working that hard a minute ago, did it? Okay, after another day's work, shall we say, the sun inevitably sets behind the horizon, and we can think about what we need to do tomorrow. Well, there'll be more work on the roof for sure. It's usually best once you've started to paint a surface just to keep going and try and keep the gaps in between coats of paint to the minimum. So we're going to keep going, and we're starting very early today, so early in fact that we still have condensation on the roof, which you can see me here wiping off with our little wiper blade. And once we've gone over the roof and got rid of the main body of the condensation with the wiper, we'll probably have to go over again with some kind of cloth just to dry up the very small parts of moisture, so we're ready to work on it. And because we finished yesterday with paint, we didn't have time to sand it after we painted it. We're going to start the day off with a light sand. We just have to give it a very gentle sand at this point. The roof surface is probably nearly as smooth as we want it, to be fair, so we don't have to apply too much pressure in order to smooth the surface off. We just want to create a light key, i.e. we want to create a little bit of mechanical bond, a bit of a rougher surface for the paint to adhere to. And once we've done that, we've only created a very tiny amount of dust with that sandpaper, so there's no need to sweep it off with a brush. We can just go over with our tack cloth, as we are here, to get it nice and dust free and ready to paint. And do you know what, I do love this part of the day. There's no one around. I think it's probably before 7 in the morning at this point. So not only can we get on with our work in peace and quiet in beautiful surroundings, by the time it's lunchtime we actually feel like we've nearly done a full day's work too. Okay, we have another nice little milestone ahead of us here. We're about to put on our first coat of top coat onto the roof, and you'll notice we have two different brands here. So what are we going to do with them? Well, in an ideal world, I think the logical choice would be to use this one because it matches the brand of undercoat we've used. However, I'm a little bit concerned it's going to be too shiny, and the shininess of this paint is going to accentuate the imperfections we have across the surface of the roof. Oh, there's a goldfinch. There's a goldfinch up there. I haven't seen one in today. It's a very nice place, this actually. we can go out and explore later on. We do have work to do because it's going to get too hot in a bit, so we want to get painting before it gets into the afternoon. Anyway, so yeah, this is going to be too shiny, I think. This paint, however, has a satin finish, so it's not as shiny as this one. And the satin finish is going to go some way in actually concealing the imperfections. So this paint, I think, will look better than that one. However, if we just used one or the other, we won't have enough to complete the roof and the decks, which I want to match. So, what should we do? I know. Let's build up the first layers of top coat with this one, and then for the last couple of layers we can use this paint so we get the preferred finish we want, and we have enough to get the roof and the decks matching. Phew, a decision has been made. Right, let's get cracking before it gets too hot. Okay, so first coat of top coat. which I'm particularly pleased to use because I've mentioned before, I found this paint by the bins. So this is like an 80 quid pot of paint, I think. So it's even more enjoyable to use than normal because it hasn't cost me any money. And it's decent stuff as well. T-Mac Marine Gloss. We are using a mix of brands actually on the roof. In fact, we're using like 3 different brands of paint. We're using Hempel, Craftmaster and T-Mac. So a little bit unorthodox, but because of the money it's saving us, I think this is a good, you know, I can justify this sort of mix of brands, which perhaps you wouldn't normally do, because it's saving us so much money. And you will notice I'm using a magic pot of paint here, because every time I put my roller in it, I speed up a bit, which is kind of useful if you want to get the job done quickly. And you can see, again, we mentioned this before, but we haven't quite got 100% coverage. If we went over with the roller and we got a completely flat, completely smooth, solid block of colour, I really think it would mean that we were putting too much paint on. However, if we did do that, we're not the end of the world. If we did kind of feel that we put too much paint on, I think what the best thing to do would be is to actually wait longer than normal before we put on the next coat of paint. So yeah, that would just give the paint a chance to harden all the way through. So if the paint had gone on unusually thick, for example, you would find that the next day the paint might still not be too hard, as in you could probably sort of press your fingernail into it and make an indentation with your nail. In fact, that's probably quite a good way of testing whether or not the paint is hard enough to continue. And speaking of continuing, here we are with our second coat of top coat and our third there, just building up the coats one after the other. And although I freely admit I don't always stick that closely to paint manufacturers' recommendations, this is certainly one instance where I feel we go way beyond them. It's certainly peace of mind to know we've got a great deal of layers of paint on our roof. Although in an ideal world we'd like to keep our roof clear of sort of junk, as it were, unfortunately real life doesn't quite work out that way. Haven't got a lot of space in a narrowboat, so invariably you do end up with stuff in the roof, so it's good that the surface is well protected.
What a lovely morning. I do like these early mornings, I must say. And we're going to continue with the roof. So where are we at with the roof? Well, we've just dried it, and in doing so we've also cleared the roof of dust, so there's no need to go over with a tack cloth. And we're going to carry on with our top coat. We've done 3 layers of gloss top coat already, but if you remember, we're going to switch to this satin top coat to finish off. And although it's perhaps not ideal to mix the 2 brands together, one on top of the other, we're going to counteract that by creating a 50-50 mix of the satin and the gloss before we put our last coats of satin top coat on, in the same way that we mix together the undercoat and the top coat. So we've got just over half a 750ml pot here, and I think 750ml is about the right amount to do 1 coat on the roof. So we're just going to pour that in a little pot and add the equivalent of gloss top coat, and then I think we'll be ready to go.
And I don't think we need to dwell on this stage for too long. We know what it looks like to roller a bit of paint on a narrowboat roof if you've been watching this video series. And how many coats have we done? We've done 3 primer, 4 undercoat, 1 half undercoat, half top coat, 3 top coat, plus this one, and I think there's another 3 to come, which that gives us a grand total of 15 coats, which is, yeah, very good. And we did our 50-50 coat on the roof. Now it's time to do our 50-50 coat on the hatch and the deck. We've spent enough time on the roof for one episode, I think. And yeah, the hatch and the deck, they're fully undercoated. So we could go straight on with top coat. There's really nothing wrong with doing that, but I think not only is this 50-50 coat going to increase the adhesion of the top coat onto the undercoat, but because our top coat is actually a reasonably different colour to our undercoat, doing this 50-50 coat is actually going to make the kind of colour difference between the layers a little bit less. I feel a bit more comfortable when that's the case. So yeah, we zip through this top coat on the hatch very nicely, and while we have our 50-50 paint out, we can turn our attention to the back deck as well. Now, unusually here I'm not using any thinner, whereas usually I would have the thinner out. So I'm going to try and do it just pure paint with no thinner. The advantage being, I think, just the strength of the paint is better without the thinner, really. And because we're painting on relatively small areas, or sort of narrow areas certainly, it's a lot easier to do that without any thinner. However, on this deck section, the brush strokes are slightly longer than the borders, so it's a little bit harder to use the paint without the thinner. And I'm counteracting that by putting on a bit thicker than normal, so the thicker paint is going to take longer to dry, so it's going to be easier to work our brush through it. And although I mentioned before the kind of colour difference between top coat and undercoat, you want to kind of don't want it to be too abrupt, as it were. In this case, I am actually putting just top coat onto undercoat. I'm not doing a 50-50 mix here, only because I've actually run out of undercoat. So, you know, this is perfectly within the realms of recommended practice by paint manufacturers, so it's not a problem. But yeah, there we go. Looks nice and neat, doesn't it? And back on our 50-50 for the deck border. And I apologise for the lack of interesting camera angles on this section. I did drop one of my cameras in the river, so unfortunately I can't do kind of a multiple camera angle shot for this section. And I want to specifically use this plan view shot because once we finish the deck, I'm then going to publish like a time-lapse video of painting the deck from the very beginning to the very end. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing that because the before and after difference should be really dramatic. Not only is the colour going to be a lot brighter, a lot sharper, you know, almost with fresh paint, it's always going to look beautiful, but we're going to have quite an interesting non-slip pattern on the deck, as well as having some more sort of standard non-slip sections on either side of the deck. And when we are painting our nice shiny 50-50 paint on here, hopefully we can see that the area we're painting on is considerably smoother than it was before. Remember, we put on quite a lot of filler, quite a lot of sanding on this section. So although we won't have got it perfect, you know, it's we're only human. Difficult to get things perfect, to be honest, unless you spend considerable amount of time on. Yeah, I think we can see, yeah, there's a very big improvement. So yeah, very happy about that. And this is the last bit of work for this episode. I think we've done enough for one episode, and we do have a few minutes left before we can sign off. That gives us the perfect opportunity to look up in our little insect book what kind of moth it was we saw when we were picking berries this morning. So let's see if we can find it. Crickets, earwigs, fleas, butterflies, must be getting close here. Moths, okay, moths, right. It was kind of orange and brown, wasn't it, with little white spots. So let's see what we've got here. Ruby tiger, cinnabar moth. We saw one of them in an earlier episode, didn't we? What else we got here? Gothic moth, marbled beauty, frosted orange moth. That sounds like a nice sort of chocolate treat, that one. And yes, that's definitely it there. Look at that. The herald moth. Herald moth. The larva feeds on willows and poplars, which makes a lot of sense because There were lots of willow trees by the riverside, fond as they are of water. But what we wanted to know was why it was vibrating like that. I was getting a bit guilty. I was starting to think it was shivering with fear because I was trying to pick it up, wasn't I? And so yeah, why do moths vibrate? Moths vibrate. Well, it says here that, it doesn't say here actually, I looked it up on the internet, and the reason is they vibrate like that because they're warming their muscles up in preparation to fly for the first time in the morning. So they're doing little warm-up exercises. So luckily I wasn't frightening it, which was good. And it's at this time of year, August, that heralds, get it, the appearance of my favourite animal in the British Isles, which is also a moth. And let's see if we can find it in here. I'll show it to you in the book, and then we're going to go out and try and find some. It's extremely colourful. There it is. The Jersey tiger moth. Very, very beautiful animal. And we're going to have a little look and see if we can find some. And who knows, we may even find some more moths. So let's go and have a look. And straight away we happen across a burnet moth, which are not too difficult to see in tall grassland with lots of flowers. Its bright colours serve as a warning to predators that it is in fact poisonous. And what's this? This is a cinnabar moth. We did see one of these briefly in a previous episode. It's also poisonous, but in order to build up its poison, it has to eat a lot of ragwort. Ah, here we are. Here it is. My favourite, the Jersey tiger moth. Look at that. It's a lot bigger than the other two, so it's quite easy to see if you do come across one. Obviously, its bright colours as well make it very distinctive. I always get the impression that it's kind of too brightly coloured for England. It just stands out so much when you see one. Despite its bright colours, it is not actually poisonous. However, when it feels threatened, it does release a foul odour in order to deter predators. And I love this moth. I really love it so much. Look at that, those beautiful tiger stripes. What a great way to sign off this week's episode. I'd like to thank you all for watching, as always. Please do continue to connect with the channel in any way you see fit, be it subscribing, liking, or in particular commenting. I'd like to thank everyone for their comments so far. I'm really, really happy about that. Really like getting the comments. Please, as well, feel free to ask questions about any sort of painting techniques or anything you like, really. And on that note, I guess it just leaves me to sign off. Thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all back at the boat in our next episode.